to set the scene a little bit and put you in context, the European Economic and Social Committee is one of the consultative bodies of the European Union. So our mission is to bring the voice of the different civil society organizations into the decision-making process. We do it through our opinions, and sometimes, and this is the case of the opinion that I'm gonna present to you now on gender lens investment, sometimes when we detect that there are issues that are not covered by the co-legislators, or they're not in the pipeline, or we need to work further, we do one initiative opinion. So this is the case of this one. Now, the financial aspects of gender equality, they do remain a blind spot a little bit in the EU legislation, in the EU policies. And we believe that only by creating an inclusive financial ecosystem in the EU and in the member states, we can actually advance faster towards gender equality. Now, we were until now in a turning point where gender budgeting and gender lens investing was gaining momentum, but it's still very fragmented across the EU, and we really lack a clear and systemic focus towards this direction. So what we wanted to reflect upon in the opinion was is that without specific funding for female entrepreneurship, for self-employment, but also funding for specific gender policies and measures that will improve women's position, the evolution will be much slower. So we first try to analyze the situation in let's say 3 levels. On a micro level, everything is about creating a fertile ground for female entrepreneurship. We need to fill the pipeline with women with entrepreneurial spirit, but of course this will not happen magically. On a medium level, we think it's about the financial system and to make it more inclusive and to create an ecosystem that grants equal access to finance to women and men to boost their projects. And of course, it's not about fixing women, it's about fixing the system in the end. And on a macro level, it's about gender budgeting and public funding, how to invest public money for specific purposes. Now, some numbers that we came across during the elaboration of the opinion that I think they're quite interesting and important to take into account. According to the European Commission, women represent roughly 52% of the overall population in the EU, but we constitute 34.4% of the self-employed and 30% of the startup entrepreneurship. And in venture capitals, for example, all male-funded teams receive 92% of the money invested in the EU, and only 1% goes to female-led companies. And same goes a little bit on the public procurement. So the goal is to change these numbers. How do we do it? And I think first and foremost, it's what Elena just mentioned, and I fully agree with that. We have to make sure that women are able to push the buttons. We need to have them in senior management positions. We need to have them in partner roles. And it's quite clear how to do it on the big companies because we have the women on board directives now, but it needs to be scaled in the rest of the enterprises as well. And we also need to make sure that women do not get rejected for funding because of unconscious bias or outdated criteria. For example, the juries that they're taking the decisions on how to distribute the money, they need to get unconscious bias training so that they do not consider by default that men are more suitable to invest on their projects. No? And since equal attracts equal, we know that, we also have to make sure that juries themselves are balanced and gender balanced. And when it comes to the criteria, experience, for example, it's a criterion for funding. Why not make diversity also a criterion for that as well? Involving more women means better return on investment, better decision making. It helps create a more natural, more healthy and safe culture in the companies. And also, let's not forget the trickle-down effect. Companies with female founders also hire 6 times more women. So Europe should be a front runner in inclusive finance, and our economy will be much more competitive and much more sustainable. And I think we are capable to do it. We have the good startup landscape. We have a lot of know-how. We just need to channel the money towards the right direction. And also, it's a question of making sure that women start a business in the first place. But we must bear in mind and remove all the obstacles that prevent women from creating their own projects, whether they're big or small. No? And not only the stereotypes, but also the lack of time due to insufficient work-life balance, the burden of unpaid care for the house, for the elderly, for the kids. Sally also mentioned it. The current imbalances from coming from the labor market also lead to women having fewer opportunities for training in management and entrepreneurship. They even have less opportunities to accumulate the savings that they are required to start a business. So the labor market is also a big factor, and also education. It's through education that we will tackle the challenge of stereotypical ideas that entrepreneurship is more a male thing. So it's important to work on programs for specific skills, soft skills and hard skills. No, so schools, for example, in this sense, they do play a role in developing these financial and entrepreneurial skills and knowledge. And we do believe in the EESC that it should be included in the school curricula, but we also need to take care of the emotional part. And this is a little bit an answer to Elena's question, no? Why don't women think big? Because there is a point where we still have to continue building on women's confidence. We have to make sure we do not develop this imposter syndrome that it's quite common among women, even in higher position. And also we need to increase these European programs, such as this forum, working with role models, working a lot on networking women, on mentoring each other, so that we can create this structure of mutual support. Then, I mean, Sally and Elena also mentioned the importance of data collection. I fully agree with that. Data is paramount. We need data for gender lens investing, specifically in the private sector and on gender budgeting as well. There are some data, but they still need to be harmonized. It's not mandatory for the member states to collect data, so I think this is also important to try to push forward this direction. Because I mean, with solid data, we will be able also to monitor and analyze the situation and take adequate measures for the future. And another thing that we also propose in the opinion is to develop gender-dedicated funds to make sure that investments reach women, to make sure that all big venture capitals and private equities also have a gender lens investment strategy. And beyond direct financing, we highlight also the importance of budgets and with a gender perspective for member states and the EU. We want to reflect on the use of gender budgeting tools all through the budgetary cycles to ensure that the necessary policies are financed, and they will also create the conditions to mobilize resources from the private sector. And the process of defining the budget needs to be also participatory. Civil society and social dialogue have to be enhanced there. It's important to bring on board all actors so that we can detect the areas where we need to pay more attention. And one of the tools that it's most useful is also gender impact assessments and gender analysis in the financial policies. And the problem is that lots of people working on budgets do not know actually how to apply in practice the gender budgeting concept. So fortunately, we have a lot of material already provided by EESC and by the European Women's Forum on gender budgeting specifically. So we do recommend training on gender budgeting and gender mainstreaming for all people working in the financial institutions and also in the administration. And I mean, I mentioned diversity earlier as a criterion on private funding, but it's also applicable to public funding as well on national, regional, and EU level. We need to use public funds and public procurement to promote and maintain women's talent in the labor market. And even in the most recent Recovery and Resilience Fund, the focus on women, for example, was practically non-existing. It was not included in the beginning in the first guidelines of the Commission. Later on, it was introduced. Some member states drafted some plans and they added some paragraphs there on gender equality, but it would have been important to mainstream this ever since the first moment. And of course, have specific standards, because what we don't want to is to pinkwash. No, we want meaningful criteria for women's participation. And just one last thought, focusing more on rural areas and the next CAP, for example. We do believe that the focus of the future of the CAP needs to be more on job creation by contributing in a more diversified rural economy in the rural areas. It should encourage people to settle in rural areas, to promote generational renewal, which also Elena mentioned, it's the #1 problem for farmers. It's also to empower women and the arrival also of new people with new projects, not only in agriculture, but also in the food processing, tourism, etc., etc. So just to sum up, our vision from the EESC is to have an ambitious vision on the EU on gender lens investing and gender budgeting, including concrete targets and KPIs, updated criteria for public funding, intensified programs to improve female entrepreneurship, and the plan for inclusive financial ecosystem that will accelerate the pace towards an effective gender equality.